Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you something. When was the last time you paused and really felt peace? Not silence, not distraction, but actual peace. Because in today's world, calm isn't the norm. It's rare, it's rebellious. And staying positive, that's become a radical act. But what if I told you that both calm and positivity aren't traits you're born with? They're practices, habits, muscles you can build. Let me walk you through 6 powerful truths that can anchor you even in the fiercest storms. We live in a world obsessed with appearances. We're told to chase success, to build reputations, to collect followers and titles, as if they're trophies that define who we are. We spend years chasing validation, looking for peace in promotions, relationships, applause. But the truth is, none of those things are stable. Jobs come and go, people disappoint. Circumstances change in an instant. And if your peace is dependent on what's happening around you, then your peace will always be hostage to forces outside your control. That's why your inner world must be your first priority, because it is the only world you'll never lose access to. Think about it. When your mind is cluttered with fear, doubt, or resentment, you could be standing in the most beautiful place on earth and still feel miserable. But when your mind is anchored in clarity, gratitude, and presence, you could be surrounded by chaos and still feel at peace. We don't experience life as it is, we experience life as we are. If your inner world is filled with noise, nothing outside of you will ever feel enough. But if your inner world is rooted in intention and perspective, everything outside becomes manageable, even the storms. Viktor Frankl, a man who endured one of the darkest chapters of human history, understood this better than anyone. Imprisoned in Auschwitz, stripped of everything, he discovered a truth most of us never will. You can be physically caged and still spiritually free. You can lose every external freedom and still hold on to the most powerful one: the ability to choose your response. He chose meaning over despair. He chose to find light in the darkest of places. That's not just resilience, that's mastery of the inner world. And yet, in today's world, we're trained to react. Someone cuts us off in traffic and we let it ruin our day. A coworker criticizes us and we carry that weight home. One bad conversation spirals into self-doubt. We give away control of our inner state so easily, as if peace is something that must be earned through perfect conditions. But calm doesn't come when everything is calm. It comes when you decide not to let chaos infect your state of being. Calm is a choice, not a consequence. And like any choice, it takes practice. You don't train your inner world when life is easy. You train it in the middle of the storm. You train it when you feel overwhelmed and choose to breathe. You train it when someone disrespects you and you respond with dignity. You train it when everything is falling apart and you say, even this will pass. That's the work. That's the discipline. Because peace is not a passive gift. It's an active practice. Some of the most centered people you'll ever meet have walked through deep pain. Not because they ignored it, not because they were untouched by hardship, but because they learned to stop outsourcing their emotional stability. They stopped waiting for the world to change and started mastering their own minds. They built habits that reinforced their values. They created inner rituals that kept them grounded. And most importantly, they redefined what success meant, not as control over life, but as alignment with self. Alignment doesn't mean perfection. It means you know what matters. It means you make decisions from your values, not your moods. It means you're honest about what's happening inside of you, even when it's messy. Because ignoring your inner world doesn't make the pain go away, it makes it louder. You can't fake peace, you can't force calm, but you can create the conditions for both, and that starts by paying attention to your thoughts, your breath, your trigger. Your inner world is always talking. The question is, are you listening? We're quick to clean up our appearance to fix the surface, but we delay tending to the roots. You can plant a tree in the best soil, give it water and sun, but if the roots are tangled or weak, it won't thrive. That's your mind, that's your soul. You can decorate your life with success and shiny things, but if your roots are shallow, if you're disconnected from your core, those things won't fulfill you. The real growth begins underground. That's why you can't afford to neglect your inner state, because it's the lens through which you see everything else. A wound unhealed becomes a filter. A fear unaddressed becomes a limitation. A belief unchecked becomes a prison. But when you bring awareness to those things, when you face them with compassion instead of shame, you give yourself a chance to rewrite the story. You stop being a victim of your patterns and start becoming the author of your piece. There's power in choosing your response, power in saying, I won't let this define me, power in pausing before reacting, in holding your center when everything else is pulling you in different directions. That power doesn't come from pretending everything is fine. It comes from doing the inner work, from facing your shadows, from building a mindset that refuses to be controlled by circumstances. We often wait for a sign, a breakthrough, some external event to grant us peace. But what if the sign is your own willingness to change the narrative? What if the breakthrough isn't out there, but in here, in the moment you stop blaming the world and start becoming your own foundation? What if your peace doesn't begin when things get easier, but when you get stronger, when you finally realize that your calm isn't waiting for you on the other side of chaos, it's forged inside of it? The world will never stop testing you. There will always be something unfinished, someone unkind, some area of your life that feels uncertain. But those are not reasons to panic. They are invitations to deepen. Every disruption is a chance to return to yourself. Every trigger is an opportunity to understand. Every hard moment is a call to build something unshakable inside of you. That's where true leadership begins. Not in leading others, but in leading yourself, in being the calm in the storm, not just for your sake, but for the people around you, because when you master your inner world, you give others permission to do the same. You stop adding to the noise and start creating clarity. You stop reacting out of fear and start acting from love. And in a world addicted to speed and surface, that kind of presence is a revolution. You don't need to wait for perfect circumstances to feel peace. You need to become the kind of person who can hold peace no matter the circumstances. That's the real work. That's the mission. Because the greatest transformation doesn't happen when the world changes. It happens when you do. And that shift, the one that begins within you, shapes everything else. Your inner world shapes your outer world. Always. We all have a voice inside our head. Sometimes it's loud, sometimes it whispers, but it's always there. That voice shapes the story we tell ourselves about the life we're living. It decides whether we see ourselves as the hero or the helpless, whether we see moments of hardship as dead ends or detours. And that story we tell ourselves, it matters more than any external outcome ever could. We've been trained to focus on results, win or lose, pass or fail, hired or rejected, loved or abandoned. But life doesn't happen in black and white. The most transformative moments are the ones where the outcome doesn't match the plan, and yet something deeper is at work. A lesson is emerging, a new path is unfolding, but most of us don't stop long enough to see it. We just react. We call it a failure. We internalize the pain. We write a story that says, I'm not good enough. And that story becomes a prison. But what if the story wasn't true? What if you didn't fail that interview? You just found a gap in your preparation that you now have the power to fill. What if that rejection wasn't the end, but the exact nudge you needed to aim in a different direction? What if every setback wasn't a sign you're unworthy, but a reminder you're still in motion, still evolving, still in the arena? The problem isn't the challenge itself, it's the narrative we build around it. That narrative becomes the lens through which we view everything. And if that lens is distorted by fear, shame, or self-criticism, then no matter how much progress we make, we'll never feel whole. We'll always be measuring ourselves against some imaginary standard we never actually agreed to. The bar keeps moving and we keep feeling behind. But when we reframe the narrative, when we consciously choose a more empowering interpretation of events, we reclaim agency over our experience. Suddenly, we're not victims of circumstance, we're authors of meaning. And authors have power. This isn't about toxic positivity. It's not about pretending that pain doesn't hurt or that heartbreak doesn't sting. It's about acknowledging the reality of what happened while refusing to let that moment define our worth. It's about recognizing that courage isn't found in the outcome. It's found in the decision to show up, to try, to risk being seen, and still move forward. Imagine your best friend came to you and said, I bombed that interview, I feel like a total failure. Would you confirm that belief? Would you say, yeah, you're probably not cut out for this? Of course not. You'd remind them of their strengths, you'd point out their growth, you tell them this isn't the end, this is a chapter, the story's still unfolding. So why do we struggle to extend that same compassion to ourselves? The answer is simple. We've been conditioned to believe that self-criticism is productive, that if we're hard on ourselves, we'll improve faster. But neuroscience disagrees. Studies show that self-compassion, not self-punishment, actually leads to greater resilience, better performance, and improved mental health. When we speak to ourselves with kindness, we engage the part of our brain that fosters growth, learning, and adaptability. Think of every great leader you've ever admired. Not the ones who ruled with fear, but the ones who inspired with grace. They didn't tear people down, they lifted people up. They saw failure as data, not damnation. They knew that setbacks are part of the process, not proof you're unworthy, but evidence you're daring greatly. Reframing the narrative isn't just a mindset shift. It's an identity shift. It means refusing to define yourself by your worst day. It means choosing to believe that who you are is not limited to what you achieve. It means understanding that every stumble is an invitation to learn, to adapt, to grow stronger. There's a beautiful Japanese art called kintsugi, the practice of repairing broken pottery with gold. Instead of hiding the cracks, they highlight them. The idea is simple. The object is more beautiful because it was broken. That's what reframing the narrative looks like in real life. It means taking the broken pieces of your story and choosing to make them shine, not in spite of the pain, but because of it. There's a quote that says, "If you're going through hell, keep going." But I'd take it a step further. If you're going through hell, pause long enough to ask, what is this teaching me? What story am I writing in this moment? And is it the story I want to believe about myself? We don't get to control every event in our lives, but we do get to choose the meaning we assign to them. And that meaning determines everything. It shapes how we show up. It influences how we lead, how we love, how we dream. So the next time life knocks you down, and it will, remember this. You are not what happened to you. You are how you choose to respond. You are the meaning you give to the moment. And you have the power to rewrite the story at any time. Choose a narrative that builds you, one that honors the pain without being ruled by it, one that sees setbacks not as failures but as fuel, one that reminds you that your value is not determined by any one moment, but by the courage you show over and over again to keep going, keep growing, and keep believing in a better version of you. Because when you change the story, you change everything. Breathe first, react later. It sounds simple, doesn't it? But simplicity is deceptive. In a world that thrives on urgency, rewards immediacy, and glorifies fast reactions, the true act of strength is the one that requires us to pause. One breath. That's all it takes to change the outcome of an entire situation. And yet, that breath is often the most difficult choice we can make in the moment. Imagine you're in a high-stress situation, a heated argument, a painful disappointment, an unexpected crisis. Your heart is racing, your thoughts are loud, your body is ready to react. Fight or flight kicks in because your brain senses danger, even if the danger is just words, rejection, or fear of failure. In that space, you are most vulnerable to acting from impulse rather than intention, and this is where the battle is won or lost. Not outside you, but within you. A Navy SEAL once said, "Slow is smooth and smooth is fast." This wisdom, born in the crucible of life or death operations, isn't just about combat, it's about life. When you slow down, everything becomes more clear. When you breathe, you access your clarity, your values, your higher self. The most powerful person in the room is not the loudest, not the one with the quickest comeback, but the one who has the discipline to pause. Think about the last time you said something you didn't mean, or the last time you made a decision you regretted. Chances are you didn't stop to breathe. You didn't create space between the trigger and your response. That space, that tiny moment of pause is your freedom. It's the difference between reaction and reflection. It's the difference between adding fuel to a fire and choosing not to light the match at all. Breathing is not just biological, it's psychological and emotional. Science shows that even 60 seconds of deep, intentional breathing can lower cortisol, the stress hormone. When cortisol spikes, your brain shuts down non-essential functions like rational thinking and empathy. That's why you say things in anger that you later regret. That's why anxiety clouds your judgment. That's why fear leads you to self-sabotage. But one deep breath, one act of stillness, and your nervous system begins to shift. You move from survival mode to a state of restoration and reason. Let that sink in for a moment. A single breath has the power to interrupt centuries of generational trauma, the loop of self-doubt, the domino effect of chaos. It has the power to remind you that you are not a slave to your emotions. You are the steward of them. Breath is not weakness. It's wisdom in motion. It is your brain's way of saying, wait, there's a better path, let's find it. In our culture, we associate speed with strength. We measure productivity and responses per minute, valor and action per second. But speed without direction is chaos. Reactivity without thought is destruction. The greatest leaders, the most inspiring individuals, and the wisest humans are not those who rush into the fray. They are those who pause long enough to see clearly, to understand deeply, and then act with purpose. Consider firefighters. When entering a burning building, they don't sprint blindly through flames. They stop. They assess, they breathe, they move slowly, because every step matters. One wrong move costs lives. But their stillness is not hesitation, it's calculated courage. You don't need a burning building to learn this. Your own life is full of metaphorical fires, job stress, relationship conflict, health challenges, financial pressures. If you charge in without breath, you risk compounding the damage. If you stop, center yourself, and act with intention, you begin to lead not just your actions, but your life. We often mistake reacting as being present, but reactivity is the opposite of presence. It's a bypass of awareness. When you breathe first, you're not avoiding life. You're meeting it with grace. You're choosing to be present, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. Parents who pause before scolding, partners who breathe before blaming, leaders who stop before deciding. These are the people who change the atmosphere of a room. These are the people who carry power not through volume, but through vision. They respond rather than react. And in doing so, they create a ripple effect of calm, connection, and clarity. We live in a noisy world. Social media trains us to comment before we think. News cycles demand instant outrage. Group chats expect immediate replies. But wisdom does not live in urgency, it lives in intentionality. You don't have to join every argument. You don't have to win every debate. You don't have to prove yourself in every moment. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is nothing except breathe. That breath is an act of rebellion. It's a stand against a world that profits off your panic. It's a reclaiming of your power. It says, I am in charge of my energy. I decide how I show up. I will not be dragged by chaos. I will not be baited by fear. And when you embody that, others feel it. You become an anchor in the storm. People will come to you, not because you have all the answers, but because your presence reminds them that they already do. There's a reason the ancient traditions of meditation, mindfulness, and prayer all begin with breath, because it is the gateway to the present, and the present is where your power lives. Not in the past you can't change, not in the future you can't control, but in this breath. Right now, it's always here for you. So that next time life throws something at you, a harsh word, an unexpected blow, a moment of doubt, don't rush to fix it, to fight it, or to flee from it. Just breathe. Breathe first. Let the moment wash over you, not through you. Feel your feet on the ground. Let silence speak before you do. And then, from that still place, choose your next move. Not because you're weak, but because you're wise enough to know that real strength begins not with reaction, but with reflection. Not with control, but with calm. Not with noise, but with breath. We often talk about growth as if it's something we can force through sheer will, as if grit alone can push us to thrive. But we forget one fundamental truth. The environment we're in either feeds that growth or starves it. You can't grow roses in a toxic garden. No matter how much sunshine a plant gets, if the soil is poisoned, it won't bloom. The same goes for us. Peace and positivity don't just spring from inside us like a well that never runs dry. They are cultivated, they are sustained by what surrounds us. Take a moment to really reflect on your environment, not just the physical space, but the emotional, digital, and psychological climate you live in every day. What's in your newsfeed? Who do you talk to on a daily basis? What conversations fill your ears? What kind of energy greets you when you walk through your door? Is it supportive? Is it calm? Is it growth-oriented? Or is it cluttered with cynicism, complaints, blame, and drama? One woman I met had it all by society's standards. 6-figure salary, corner office, an apartment in the city. She was doing well. But every day she woke up with a knot in her stomach. Her workplace was cutthroat, cold, and filled with competition masked as collaboration. Her boss thrived on intimidation. Her colleagues whispered more than they spoke. It took her years to realize that no amount of money could justify living in an environment that slowly eroded her spirit. She left it all, walked away, half the salary, twice the peace. She joined a nonprofit where the mission was clear, the team was kind, and laughter was part of the culture. She told me, "I didn't know how heavy the air was until I breathed somewhere else." That's what curating your environment does. It allows you to finally breathe. And once you breathe, you can live, really live. That is the kind of wealth we should be measuring. And this isn't just about big life changes like quitting a job. This is about the daily choices we make, what we consume, who we surround ourselves with, what spaces we enter. If you start your morning scrolling through a feed filled with outrage, curated perfection, and divisive headlines, don't be surprised if you carry anxiety with you all day. If every conversation in your life centers around complaint, don't be surprised if gratitude feels like a foreign language. If you're constantly surrounded by people who doubt your potential or belittle your dreams, then even the strongest belief in yourself will eventually bend under that weight. Negativity is contagious, but so is hope, so is joy, so is ambition. We have to stop underestimating the power of proximity. Being near inspiration can inspire. Being near love can soften. Being near purpose can wake us up. Just as toxins can seep into our roots and kill what we're trying to grow, so too can goodness pour into us and cause us to bloom. Curating your environment is not about control, it's about discernment. You don't need to shut the world out, but you do need to be intentional about what you let in. This doesn't mean isolating yourself from every difficult person or uncomfortable idea. It means creating enough space, enough grounding, so that the storms of the world don't uproot you. It means having a sanctuary, a friend, a space, a practice that keeps your internal environment peaceful, even when the external world isn't. We have to stop thinking that peace is passive, that positivity is just about smiling more. No, positivity is a result. It's the outcome of choosing better, of filtering the noise, of saying no to what drains you and yes to what fills you. It's waking up and choosing to limit the drama, to unplug from the algorithm that thrives on your fear, to say, this relationship, this habit, this space, I no longer welcome it into my life. When we talk about success, we often picture the hustle, the goals, the milestones. But none of that matters if the environment we build that success in is poisoned. What's the point of reaching the top if you're too broken to enjoy the view? What's the point of achieving your dreams if the road there left you hollow? We need to define success not just by what we get, but by how we feel getting there. Peace is a worthy goal. Wholeness is a worthy goal. Joy is a worthy goal. Imagine a world where we treated our mental and emotional environments the way we treat our homes. You wouldn't let trash pile up in your living room. You wouldn't tolerate someone walking in and screaming at you every day. So why tolerate toxic thoughts? Why keep relationships that drain your energy just because they've been around for years? Why keep scrolling through a feed that only confirms your fears and amplifies your doubts? The truth is, everything around us is either helping us grow or holding us back. And we get to choose. We get to decide who we call when we're tired, what kind of stories we listen to, what kind of energy we allow into our sacred space. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for your future is take a hard look at your present and say, this needs a change. And sometimes that means walking away, sometimes that means pruning, sometimes that means building from scratch, but always it means choosing yourself, choosing your peace, choosing the version of you that's strong enough to flourish. The woman who left her corporate job didn't just change where she worked, she changed who she was becoming. She chose joy, she chose a healthier soil, and because of that, she didn't just grow, she bloomed. You can too. But first you have to ask yourself a hard question. Is the garden you're growing in helping you blossom, or is it slowly killing you? The answer to that question might be the most important one you ever give, because your environment is not just where you live, it's what you become. There's something profoundly human about the act of service, not service in the grand heroic sense of saving the world or solving global issues, but the kind of service that whispers instead of shouts, the quiet kind, the kind that happens in coffee shops, on sidewalks, in living rooms, and in inboxes. Because if we're honest, most of us aren't spiraling because the world is on fire. We're spiraling because our world feels like it is. And the quickest way to pull ourselves out of that spiral isn't to try to climb out alone. It's to reach for someone else, to be the hand that lifts, the voice that soothes, the presence that steadies. When life feels heavy, our natural instinct is to look inward. We overthink, we catastrophize, we worry, we become prisoners of our own anxiety, caged by our thoughts, isolated in our struggles. But there's an antidote to that isolation, and it begins the moment we step outside of ourselves and into someone else's pain, not to fix it, but to honor it. Studies have shown again and again that acts of kindness don't just help the receiver, they heal the giver. When you hold the door for someone, when you compliment a stranger, when you call a friend just to ask how are you really doing, your brain rewards you. Oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, all of them fire up. These aren't just feel-good chemicals. They're the biological evidence that our bodies are wired for connection. That service is not just moral, it's medicinal. And here's what's even more powerful. When we serve others, we're reminded that we can. We're reminded that we're not helpless, even when our own lives feel uncertain. When you help someone else breathe a little easier, your own lungs expand. Because you realize something crucial. You still have value, even in your own storm. There's a story I once heard about a man walking home after a terrible day. Everything had gone wrong. He felt defeated. Invisible, as he walked past a bus stop, he noticed a young mother juggling her toddler and groceries, clearly struggling. He paused, shifted his own weight under the weight of his problems, and said, "Do you need a hand?" The woman looked at him with grateful eyes, nodded, and for the next 5 minutes, he helped her carry her bags down the street. She thanked him. He smiled genuinely for the first time all day. It didn't solve his problems, but for a moment, he was no longer drowning in them. Because in that moment, he wasn't the man with problems. He was the man who helped. And that changes everything. The truth is, you don't need to have it all together to be of service. You don't need to be healed to hold someone else's hand. You don't need to be whole to show up. In fact, some of the most powerful acts of service come from people who are broken but still choose to give. That's what makes it real. That's what makes it matter. We often wait to serve until we feel ready. We wait until we're successful, stable, sorted. But service isn't about perfection. It's about presence. It's about seeing people, hearing them, making space for them. Sometimes the most impactful thing you can do is simply sit with someone in their sadness without trying to cheer them up. Because being seen is a form of healing. Being heard is a form of love. And love doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's a text that says, "You crossed my mind." Sometimes it's a cup of coffee left at a coworker's desk with a sticky note that reads, "You've got this." Sometimes it's a smile, a listening ear, a warm silence. It doesn't have to be dramatic to be divine. The paradox of service is that the more you give, the fuller you feel. It's a kind of beautiful math that doesn't make sense on paper. You pour into others and somehow your own cup rises because your soul isn't depleted by giving. It's nourished. Think about the people who've impacted your life most. Were they the loudest, the richest, the most accomplished? Or were they the ones who showed up when you needed it most? The teacher who believed in you when no one else did? The friend who stayed on the phone when you couldn't stop crying? The stranger who smiled when you felt invisible? These moments don't get awards, they don't make headlines, but they change lives. Quietly, powerfully, forever. So if you're feeling lost, don't look for direction, look for someone who needs you. If you're anxious, don't try to numb it, channel it into kindness. If you're drowning, find someone else who's treading water and say, "I'm with you." You'd be amazed how quickly despair evaporates in the presence of shared humanity. We live in a world obsessed with more money, more success, more status. But the ones who sleep peacefully at night aren't the ones with the biggest bank accounts. They're the ones who know that someone out there breathes a little easier because they exist. Service isn't just about helping others. It's about anchoring yourself to what really matters. It's about resisting the gravity of self-absorption by choosing compassion. And in doing so, you rise. You remember that your worth isn't tied to your achievements. It's tied to your impact, to your ability to look at another human being and say, you matter. I see you. I've got you. We don't need more heroes. We need more humans. Humans who understand that service isn't a grand gesture, it's a daily choice, a way of life, a quiet revolution. And it starts the moment we stop asking, what do I need? And start asking, who needs me? Because the moment you make someone else's burden lighter, your own load shifts. The moment you choose service over self, you stop spiraling, you start living, and not just for yourself, but for something bigger, something truer, something that just might save us all. When life starts to feel like it's spiraling, when the chaos of the world begins to pull at every thread of your sanity, it's tempting to think we've lost all control, that no matter how hard we try, things just keep happening to us. Unexpected layoffs, someone else's poor choices, heartbreaks we never saw coming, wars in distant lands that ripple into our economy, and sudden illnesses that change everything overnight. But in those moments, what if the power isn't in changing the outside world, but in how we choose to stand inside it? The truth is, we are surrounded by things we cannot control. We cannot control whether people treat us kindly. We cannot control the weather. We cannot control what others believe, how they act, or the way a stranger may cut us off in traffic. We cannot stop time. But we can decide how we will carry ourselves in those moments. We can decide if we meet challenge with chaos or calm, if we respond with frustration or focus, if we let the tide of the world sweep us away, or if we anchor ourselves by turning inward and claiming our own response. There is immense strength in narrowing your gaze to the things within your grasp. Think of a ship in a storm. If the captain tries to control the sea, he'll lose everything. But if he focuses on the rudder, on the sails, on the discipline of his crew, and the steadiness of his voice, he increases the odds of weathering the storm. The rudder is your attitude. The sails are your daily habits. The crew is the way you speak to yourself and others. You can't still the sea, but you can sail through it. And sometimes it starts small, so small it feels laughable. When your life feels like it's collapsing and you're overwhelmed by grief or anxiety or failure, someone might say, just make your bed. It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But it's not about the bed. It's about the act, the decision to take ownership of something. That small act sends a signal to your brain, I am not powerless. It's not the size of the wind, it's the reclaiming of your agency. When you take action, however small, in a world that wants you to freeze, you interrupt the cycle of helplessness. You shift your energy, you breathe again. That 5-minute journal entry isn't solving world peace, but it's giving your mind space to reflect instead of ruminate. That healthy meal isn't curing your anxiety, but it's showing your body you care. That phone call to a friend might not end your struggle, but it reminds you you're not alone in it. Too often we wait for the big changes to feel better. We think, I'll calm down once I get the job. I'll feel okay once they apologize. I'll move forward once this crisis ends. But peace doesn't come from the outcome, peace comes from the practice. Every time you choose to redirect your attention from what you can't change to what you can, you are reinforcing a mindset of resilience. There's a reason Stoic philosophers clung to that simple idea, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Because life in ancient Rome wasn't easy. Much like life today, it was full of uncertainty and injustice, but the wisdom has echoed across time. Control your thoughts, and you control your world. There was a man named Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor. He was imprisoned in a Nazi concentration camp, and he watched as his family was taken from him, his work destroyed, his freedom gone. Everything was outside of his control. But he realized something that would later form the basis of his powerful teachings. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our freedom. He couldn't control what the gods did. He couldn't change the horrors around him, but he could control how he gave meaning to his suffering. He could choose to find purpose, to remain kind, to help fellow prisoners endure. And in doing so, he found a strength that transcended his circumstances. You don't have to endure something as unimaginable as a concentration camp to apply this principle. You apply it every time someone says something unkind, and you choose not to let it define your worth. You apply it when you're stuck in traffic and decide to use the time to listen to a podcast that helps you grow. You apply it when you feel rejected, but still show up the next day and try again. You apply it when you lose someone you love, and instead of collapsing, you decide to honor them by living with more intention. Power is not about dominating the external world. It's about mastering your internal one. That's where your agency lies. That's where your courage is built. That's where your peace is forged. The world will always offer new reasons to feel powerless, but you can build a habit of coming home to yourself every morning, ask, what do I control today? And answer it honestly. Maybe it's your breakfast.